Billy Connolly once said, expect nothing and you can't be disappointed. So when we were going into the Brentford game, I didn't believe for 1 second that David Moyes was going to be sacked by West Ham if we got beat. So when we did lose, and when the news came out yesterday that the board are backing him, Moyes is not going to be sacked, he's going to be here for the next game, as you were, my disappointment wasn't there. It was what I was expecting. I didn't have any hope that he was going to be dismissed, so that wasn't taken away from me. So the news was unsurprising. However, the terminology, the phrases used by 3 really reliable sources has worried me a lot. Because while I didn't think he'd get sacked after the Brentford game should we have got beat, I did believe and hoped that if we then lose away to Leeds, or even draw away to Leeds after getting beat by Brentford, he'd get sacked then. And the reason for that is because I feel the best opportunity for this board to sack David Moyes was at the start of the World Cup. We know that. After the Leicester game, that was prime time. They've ignored that. Whether we like it or not, they've done it. We have to accept it. We move along. The next best opportunity to sack David Moyes, in my opinion, is after the Leeds game. Because then we've got that FA Cup game, and then there's a bit longer. So there's a week and a half, essentially, until our next league game, which is against Wolves on the 14th of January. Now, I'm aware I'm dismissing an FA Cup game in there. We do play Brentford. But I'm dismissing it. It's a low priority at this point. So I feel that after the Leeds game, that is the next best opportunity to sack the manager. I felt that the turnaround between Brentford and Leeds is quite small, and that's part of the reason they wouldn't sack him. However, after yesterday's messaging, the way they've worded these, and I say they, I don't mean one source, I mean all 3 of them have worded it slightly different. They're all singing off the same hymn sheet here. They've all been reaching out to their sources and being given the same message, and they're conveying it back to the fan base. And the terminology worries me a lot. So while I thought they would get rid of him after the Leeds game should we fail to win, I don't believe that anymore, and it worries me a lot. Now let's start with Jacob Steinberg. Jacob Steinberg said, David Moyes still has the support of West Ham's board. Last night's defeat to Brentford leaves West Ham firmly in a relegation battle, but no plans to make a managerial change at the moment. Now I don't have an issue with that one. I don't have an issue. It's quick, it's snappy, it informs us of what's going on, and the phrase at the end, at the moment, it leaves it open to change. So if we lose to Leeds, well, they might still sack him. There's still a little bit of hope in that tweet. But then Sean's tweet and what ExWHUEmployee said. Now, like I said, all 3 are really reliable when it comes to West Ham news. All 3 have really good sources within the club, within the boardroom at the club too. And they're all similar. Sean Whetstone said, the full West Ham board continues to back manager David Moyes after his defeat against Brentford yesterday. The full West Ham board. Not David Sullivan, not Karen Beatty, not David Gold, the full board. And to sort of emphasise his point, if you like, the image that he has used on his tweet, it's got Daniel Kutinski. So it's the full West Ham board. Sean is implying now that David Moyes has got the backing of Daniel Kutinski here. They have not lined up any replacement and continue to believe he's the type of manager they would be looking for to replace him. His job is safe for now. So again, a small disclaimer at the end. For now, that could change at any time. But the rest of it, they have not lined up any replacement. Now this is what worries me a lot. Even if they weren't sacking him, even if during that 6-week break, I never thought they would sack David Moyes, but what I had hoped was they'd be lining up replacements. They'd be looking for other managers. They'd be having a look at who they'd want to bring in. Should David Moyes need to be sacked or quit, who would the next manager be? Now, part of me would like them to be doing that at all times, no matter how good your manager's doing, because you just never know what might happen. Have a look at Brighton with Graham Potter. Potter left, they knew exactly who they wanted, and I have to say, he's blown me away. I'd never really seen his football before he come to Brighton, but I have been really surprised at how well Brighton have played. But I shouldn't have been, because they've got a succession plan in place. We've got, going by Sean's tweet, we've got a manager under pressure right now, and we still don't have a succession plan. We still have no target as to who to replace David Moyes, despite the fact that at this point in time, there's a high probability he's going to have to be dismissed, and we still don't know who we want. That is very, very concerning. Now, he is the type of manager they'd be looking for if they were looking to replace him. That's just wild to me. So, let me do ex-West Ham employees because it's a bit of a similar one, and I'm going to pick both of them apart because it's really wound me up. Not what they've said, it's what they've been told. They're just passing on. They're the messengers in this instance. But ex-West Ham employee over on the West Ham Way Patreon said, this is the exact quote he got from the top source, and the quote was, "We back the manager. There are no obvious replacements available. If David Moyes was unemployed and we looked to change manager, he'd be the exact person we'd bring in." Sorry, what? So two things here. One, unemployed. What do you mean if he was unemployed? That is basically just told us any manager we go get after Moyes has to be out of work. It just goes to show that this board they can't identify managers. It's been a criticism of them in the past, not just me and Gonzo, but loads of people have said it. They're not good at hiring managers. They have to be out of work. They've only done it in one instance when they were at Birmingham, when they paid a small fee to get a manager in. Once, that's it. At West Ham, every manager we've hired has been free, essentially. And that's just basically confirmation that any manager we do get in, if Moyes got sacked today, any manager we get in is unemployed. We won't be poaching this manager or that manager. We're not doing that. We're not going to be negotiating with clubs. We're going to be going after somebody currently out of work. So whether that's Sean Dyche, whether it's Thomas Tuchel, or anyone in between, they have to be unemployed. We're not interested. And they go, so that's a bit wild. And that just shows the lack of succession plan. Do you think Brighton or Brentford or well-run clubs, do you think they have a list of managers that are only unemployed? Say, well, if we need a new manager, it's going to be one of these. Oh, he's got a job now, score him out. Then they've got their managers, and it doesn't matter which club they're at, doesn't matter what the compensation package is, that's the one they want. They don't put a price on. And I think it's wildish. You'll spend 50 million on a Brazilian midfielder. You'll spend 35 million on an Italian striker. 25 million on a Moroccan centre-back. I don't know what their internationalities have to do with it. My point is, we spent 180 million in the summer. But when it comes to paying for the right manager, oh no, we don't do that. Now part of the problem is there, which is identifying the right manager. But imagine they could do that. Hypothetically, they could identify the right manager to work with this set of players. Yeah, but he's got a club. We're not paying any. So they refuse to pay 5, 10 million, whatever it might be, to get the manager. But yet they'll spend 180 million on the players, but not 10 million to make it work. It's just crazy. It's like opening up a 5-star restaurant, buying the best ingredients, decorating it as much as spending money everywhere in your restaurant, and when it comes to getting a head chef in, going, oh yeah, he's a bit expensive, isn't he? We'll go get the guy from Weatherspoons. It just blows my mind. It really wound me up. But I'll tell you what, it's the other thing that wound me up a lot. He's the type of manager. First of all, there's other types. There's other managers, the same ilk of David Moyes. It doesn't have to be David Moyes. Sean Dyche is, to some extent, what they do the mean type of manager. A manager that can come in and save you from relegation. That's what they mean. Let's be perfectly clear about this. They're talking about a manager that's going to come in, pick up a group of players on the floor, and get us out of a relegation battle. Sean Dyche is probably in that category in their eyes, right? So there's other managers. If that's the type of manager you want, then fine. I don't necessarily agree with it, but fine. But it doesn't have to be David Moyes. If Leicester City had to replace Brendan Rodgers, scrap that. If Man City had to replace Pep Guardiola, they would go get a manager as similar to Pep Guardiola as much as possible. But it's not going to be Pep Guardiola. Do you know what I mean? It's going to be, of course, it is going to be that type of manager to work with that type of players. That's what you do. I keep going back to Brighton, but that's what they've done. They've gone and got a manager similar to Graham Potter in terms of his playing style because it just works. I'm trying to stay calm here. It's really wound me up. But the last thing that just throws me wild, the type of manager that David Moyes is. So what is he? Are we now? Is this the board accepting David Moyes is a manager to keep you in the Premier League and that is it? Is that what they're accepting? Because if so, I go back to the question I've asked 100 times. Maybe not that much. 20 times I've asked this question. And it's been rhetorical. In the summer, David Moyes was on a podcast, and David Moyes said, previously we've been buying players to keep us in the Premier League, to get us away from relegation. But now we're looking to bring in players to get us into the top 4. Now, like I said, it doesn't mean he's trying to get into top 4. He's bringing in players good enough to get to play Champions League football, essentially. That's what he's saying. Is the type of players we're going after now has changed. And I don't know who it was, and I wish I knew, because I keep referring to it, and I think it was such a fantastic tweet, and it made me think, it made me, well, agree with him to some extent, but here was the question, and it was in reference to David Moyes. What David Moyes had just said: we used to buy players for avoided relegation, now we're buying players to get into the top 4. David Moyes' words. And the question was, what happens if David Moyes is the manager? What happens if we brought in David Moyes to keep us away from relegation, but now we need a new manager to get us into the top 4? And I just thought it was absolutely perfect. And that was in the summer. That was back before a ball was kicked in the Premier League, because Moyes had done the podcast during the close season, and that question came up during the season. So it was off the back of West Ham finishing 7th and getting to the semi-final Europa League. This wasn't somebody jumping on West Ham being 17th in the league and saying, oh, right, well, Moyes, are you good enough to get... No, this was back then when arguably Moyes' stock was at an all-time high at West Ham. That was the question posed, and I thought it was absolutely fantastic. Now, when the board say that's the type of manager we want, so is that the board saying that Moyes is a manager to avoid relegation? If so, then why were we buying players in the summer to try and get top 4 football with a manager that you feel his job is to avoid relegation? Does that make sense? It makes sense in my head. I'm hoping it's making sense as it's coming out of my mouth. It's a hard one to explain. But the whole terminology of those updates from Jacob, from X and Sean has worried me a lot. Because like I said at the start, I didn't think he'd go after Brentford. But I did think that if we were to not win at Ellen Road on Wednesday, he would get the sack. That 1 point out of those 2 games is not enough. I am genuinely worried right now that we won't win on Wednesday. And I'm even more worried that on Thursday morning we're going to wake up and we're going to get the same message. The board are backing Moyes. The FA Cup game doesn't matter. It's all about Wolves and Everton. Those back-to-back games in 2 weeks' time. It's all about that. That is my fear. And I was right about Brentford. And I pray I'm wrong about the Leeds United thing. I pray that I'm wrong, that if we fail to win, David Moyes keeps his job. But going by what those updates have said, and like I said, there's a little disclaimer in each of them, which is for now, at the moment, which means you can change your mind at any time. Which is the most important thing in life, in my opinion. Well, not the, but one of the most important things, which is when you've seen new data, reevaluate. Always be open to changing your opinion when you get new information. So if we do lose, the board should reevaluate, and I just hope that they do, and their decision is to dismiss David Moyes. But my worry right now is we're going to get a similar update on Thursday morning if we fail to win at Ellen Road. And a draw, I said about the Brentford one, a draw is a very, very dangerous result. It doesn't really help us out in terms of our league position. It's a point, it's not doing enough. But what it does do is it probably keeps Moyes in a job. I've got that feeling about Leeds, that if we win, he's going nowhere. If we lose, there's a possibility he'll get sacked, although I don't really believe it after those updates. But if we draw, I think they can. Just gets kicked down the road. Simple as that. And this 3-game thing, it just resets. We go again for another couple. We are in a horrible, horrible situation at the minute. The club don't know who they want if they have to sack Moyes. They've got no plans to sack Moyes, but even if they did, they don't know who they want. But he has to be unemployed, and he has to be a manager exactly like David Moyes, just not called David Moyes. What a shambles. Anyway, I'm going to disappear. If you've enjoyed this video somehow, please do drop... You haven't really, have you? The first day of the year, and I'm sat here moaning, but that's just my honest opinion. When I read all that yesterday, that is my honest opinion. Subscribe if you're new to Hamish Chat, and I'll catch you tomorrow.